Alrighty, happy Thursday, everyone, and welcome back to our NoCodeOps Live Community Show. It's so exciting to see people in the chat already. It's great to see all our friends here from the community. Hello, Aziz, Stephen from Toronto, Canada. It's great to have you here. And I hope you're all doing well wherever you're watching us from. And if this is your first time here, this is NoCodeOps, an international community for operations professionals who leverage their work and who get better, and we really want to make them the heroes of their companies. Thank you to the power of no-code tools. And that's why every Thursday we get together here. We host these free webinars to help you upskill your operations with no-code. And we invite influential guest speakers from the no-code space, like the speaker that we have today. She's an amazing educator. She's one of the best no-code teachers that I've had throughout my no-code journey. And so without further ado, let me introduce you to Kelly Goss, founder at Solvaa. Hi, Kelly.
Hello, Claudia. Nice to see you today.
It's great to have you here. And, for those of you who don't know, we had an in-person event in London a couple of weeks ago. And Kelly was one of our speakers there. She's absolutely smashed it. Everyone loved her presentation. And of course, we had to invite her into one of our episodes here. But Kelly, I loved your kind of bio that you submitted when you applied, as a speaker here. You define yourself as a chief problem solver. Can you tell us more about that? And maybe how did you get into no code in the first place?
So chief problem solver. Well, why do I class myself as a chief problem solver? Because I feel like I'm a solver of problems, and I have a team. So yeah, I guess the chief part comes in there. But I don't want to really define myself in terms of like pigeonhole myself as such. And I guess that's a kind of broad thing. But ultimately, I help businesses to make improvements with what they do, mostly with tech and automation. But there's a lot of process stuff in there as well. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. But how did I get into this? Very long story, but to kind of cut it short, after doing a degree in microbiology and zoology, I worked in pharmaceutical and medical device manufacturing, like lab coat type stuff. I was very sciencey, and found a really good interest in helping people in those manufacturing facilities to do a better job so that we created better product to put on the marketplace. So I'm talking about like needles, syringes, blood collection tubes, vaccines, all of that kind of stuff. Then after a few years of doing that, I had a career change and I opened up a veterinary practice just for cats. I
had no idea. This is the first time I hear of this.
Just for cats. And I'm not going to say that I don't like other pets. I'm a dog lover and a cat lover, and I used to have a rat actually. So so opened up a veterinary practice with a friend who is a vet, and I did everything else in the business that like a startup business kind of does when you don't have a lot of money. We opened in the recession in 2010. It was like lots of different hats that a business owner has to wear. I had to learn about all this stuff that I did not know about, coming from that kind of background, the pharmaceutical medical device stuff. And I very quickly realized how inefficient businesses can be, because I was in the thick of it. And it was like me working loads of hours, 60 plus hours a week, which doesn't even seem like a lot now, but I mean, it was a lot of hours. And, literally 9 o'clock at night on a Sunday doing a tax return because we had no time to do other stuff. When I left that business, just because of, kind of moving on to different stuff, I'd learned all these business skills and all of that kind of stuff. And I actually didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And I'd done some bookkeeping as part of my role in the business. And I started doing some bookkeeping, and I found this client, and I was doing some bookkeeping for him, and all of his processes were totally inefficient. And long story short, I helped him find the right tools. I integrated them. I used Zapier. That's where I kind of learned about Zapier. Mind blown. I was just like, oh my God, this is so amazing. And I basically did myself out of my bookkeeping job because I had put all of this tech in place to make it more efficient, which meant that they had a totally scalable process. They saved loads of money. It was like pretty awesome. And my client at that time was like, this is amazing. You should do this. This is what you should do with your life. And I'm
That's
like,
your calling.
yeah.
That's your
Yeah.
calling.
I was like, interesting. Actually, this was pretty cool. So that's kind of the start of it, really. And that was in 2016. And now here I am.
Now you're smashing it. Now you're teaching other people how to get there. And I really love that story because it started from a point of kind of pain, the pain point of just like, oh my God, this is just like unbearable. How can I make it better? And I love the fact that you then became the hero of your company, which is what I'm trying to help other operators do here with our community. So again, it's great to have you here. It's such a role model to me. And I love the fact as well that our talk today is going to be quite tool agnostic, right? And we're not going to demo a no-code tool. I'm going to let Kelly obviously guide you through the presentation, but from what she was telling me is more about thinking when it is or it isn't worth automating, which is something that many of us should be thinking about whenever we start, whenever we approach a new project or a new automation, whatever it is. You always have to kind of like map out your process and identify opportunities for automation or not. So Kelly, with that being said, should we put in your screen?
Let's do it. Hold on a second. Let me.
Great. Awesome. I can see it. And also great to see Susan, who's joined us, and Halil from Turkey. I love that our community is so like international, like we're connecting people from all over the globe, which is fantastic. And again, our events are for you. So people that are watching, I want for these 60 minutes to be bringing you as much value as possible. So do interact in our chat, do interact with us and the speaker. We're going to have a little Q&A at the end of the session, but really try and get as much learning as you can, because we are very fortunate to have these amazing experts here. All right, let's get the screen. Yep, and we can see it, Kelly.
Great. Okay, so are your operations future ready? Well, I'm actually going to expand a little bit on what you mentioned there, Claudia, about what is the right thing to automate, because I feel like there is so much more to this situation than what do we automate. I feel like we always need to go back to basics, and I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail. Just some extra stuff about myself, which I didn't mention. So I run a company called Solvaa. We have an automation academy, but we also are an agency. We help businesses all over the world improve the way that they work with the right tools, better processes, and automation and AI, generative AI mostly. And we are Pipedrive certified partners, Xero certified advisors, Smart Suite certified consultants, and Zapier certified experts. And I'm proud to say that I'm one of very few certified female Zapier experts in the world. And there aren't even that many certified experts in general, but not very much of us, not many of us are women. So I'm quite proud about that. I'm also the author of this book over here, Automate It with Zapier and Generative AI. And if you're interested in learning more about Zapier, it is available on Amazon. And Phil, co-founder and CEO of NoCodeOps, did the foreword for it very kindly. So if you want to know more about Zapier, even if you're an experienced Zapier user, there's a lot of gems in there. So that's just a little bit about me. First thing that I want to start with, which I think leads on to what I want to talk about, is a quote from Bill Gates. The first rule of any technology used in a business is that automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify that efficiency. But the second is that automation applied to an inefficient operation will magnify the inefficiency. I love this quote because basically it highlights all of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about now. And I believe that you can't put good automation, good efficient automation in place if you don't have the right tools in your business, in the company that you work in, the right ways of working. And that's only when you should be starting to think about optimizing that with automation and AI maybe. And I think there's one thing that's also missing from this process, this diagram here, is that people are obviously important. We're working with people every day, and as operations professionals, we would be trying to find ways to make the lives of the people better. And that's kind of the ultimate thing here. And obviously make the company more efficient, save money, all of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
A few things that I think are important to mention here, and I'm not going to go into too much detail because hopefully this isn't going to look scary to people, but I think in terms of the way that we work and the stuff that I'm going to be talking about today, it's really important to bear in mind business process management principles. So using process improvement principles to take into consideration how you should be streamlining the way that you're working. So some of the things that I might mention as we're talking are continuous improvement, total quality management, brainstorming, process mapping, 5W1H. I'm going to go into that a bit more detail. Some things that you may have heard these words flying around and thought, okay, well, what does that mean? Ooh, moving on. Lean management, Deming cycle, Jidoka, Kaizen, some Japanese words that are really important in process improvement in general. So what I want to do first of all is introduce you to a trademarked methodology that we actually use with all of our clients. And this is some stuff that we teach, I teach when I'm talking about automation. And it's a simple 4-step process that I use for anything related to improving a process. And that could be finding a new app to use for the business, or it could be implementing automation, or it could be from start to finish, how you look at all of that stuff. For some reason, my mouse has a mind of its own here, but
oh, we can't see it, and I'm so immersed in what you're saying that I wouldn't have noticed anyway. This is brilliant.
Well, I'm doing it without hands. See, I didn't touch anything. Let me go back a bit. So first step is going to be identify. That's when you're going to be using analysis of your existing systems and mapping your processes out. Super important, because that's going to help you to identify where there are inefficiencies and issues. The second part, again, really important, plan. Simplify your processes and strategize any workflows that you might want to build or change. And that could be changes to the tools that you're using, as well as how you're going to connect those tools together with automation. The third one, execute, is optimizing your apps, connecting them together, building and testing those automations, and really importantly, documenting those new processes, as well as training out any new processes. And then the last one, really important, this comes into a continuous improvement cycle. Always remember that nothing is ever going to stay the same. Business is always going to change. New apps are going to come on the market. New ways of working are going to be developed. People are going to be doing things in different ways. Services might change, a whole bunch of stuff. Really important to make sure that you're going back and reviewing the changes that you've made. You're checking them for efficiencies or inefficiencies, and analyzing to understand, what is working and what really isn't working, and then, going through this cycle again. So that's just some info there. Another thing that I think is really important to mention here is that when you are working within a company, whether or not that's your company or you are doing consulting like we do for other businesses, in order to make changes, everybody has to be on board with those changes. So you really need to start involving people from the beginning of the process. And the biggest challenge in a lot of businesses that we work with is that not everybody is on board. There's still these things that people have in their minds about, oh, is automation and AI going to change my job? Am I going to lose my job? Those, to us maybe, who have a lot of experience with this kind of stuff, it seems like a no-brainer why somebody would think that, because it's about efficiency and helping people to do their jobs better and more efficiently and get better value out of their working roles. But I think education is a super important thing. And if you can start off a project, whether or not that's a small thing that you're trying to look at and automate, or it's a company-wide endeavor to put in place, try and start educating people about putting in place a systems, process, and automation mindset where they are then in control of things that happen within their roles. And as an operator, you might be thinking, okay, well, yeah, this is like going to be a great thing to automate, or this is what we can change to make things more efficient. But if that person's not on board with those changes, it's going to be really difficult for you to put those things in place. So I think educational programs, even if it's just a couple of videos or something, explaining to people why this stuff is important and how it's going to benefit them to kind of alleviate those fears that they might have.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
I love that so much, because education is such a big part of what we're trying to offer as well, like with these videos, with the community and everything we're trying to do, and it's so important. You're so right. We also have a comment from Philip. Hi, Phil. He says, keeping in mind all the different perspectives out there regarding AI and automation across your company is huge. Not everyone sees this stuff the way that we do. 100%.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important, because there will be people that have reservations about things. And, the more you can help people to understand the benefits, the better. And this is obviously like a whole sliding scale. You might be dealing with the people who are doing the role, but there's also, in larger companies, you have to educate the people who control the budgets. So in order to help them to approve budgets for you to work on stuff like this, there's educational stuff there, because not everybody gets the bigger picture, especially in some more traditional companies that may have been around for a long time and maybe not so clued up with new things coming out and new ways of working.
Yeah, and I know, Kelly, that we did encourage the audience to kind of be interactive, right? And so
Yeah.
we do have a question straight
Go
away
for it.
that has to do with education. So from Stephen. Hi, Stephen. He says, what should be included in the educational program, given that every stakeholder background is different?
So I think you have to be very general. And I know that is a bit of a challenge because everybody has different background and experience. But if you start with the basics rather than trying to get too granular with information, just be broad so that it seems like it covers any kind of department and role, and give information about the benefits of working digitally and using automation and how that's going to benefit them in their roles. I think just stay kind of broad. If you need to, give examples for specific types of roles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good. Okay, so let me move on. So what I was going to do was just very quickly break down some of the things that you should be taking into consideration if you are running some kind of a project that involves automation. So automation and productivity is the kind of end goal. But again, I like to go back to basics, look at everything holistically, understand what tools are being used in the business, understand whether or not we can improve the way that people are working, and then automation is kind of like the last thing there. Because if you don't have the baseline sorted, we're going back to this Bill Gates quote of, there are going to be inefficiencies, and we can look at reducing cost in different places, like app subscriptions and that kind of thing, if you go back to basics. So I'm just going to quickly run through those 4 stages in the Solvaa automation methodology. And then I want to give you some examples of some projects that we've worked on and why it's made such a difference to be able to kind of go back to the basics and not just think, oh, yeah, I just want to automate this one thing or these things, and we'll just use whatever you have. It is better to go back and understand what you can actually save in terms of cost. So let's start with the identify stage. One of the important things that I think needs to happen is, like I mentioned earlier on, make sure that you involve the right people in a project like this. I want to give you the example of if you are running an operational improvement project that involves everybody in the company, every single department, because that's going to be the biggest challenge. So what you want to be able to do is make sure that you have a sponsor, somebody who is like the top level CEO maybe or COO that is totally on board with this project and basically can, motivate everybody else to do what they need to do. You also then need departmental heads, project leads essentially in every single department. And then as part of those project leads, there needs to be a process champion. So I call them systems and process and automation champions. It doesn't matter what you call them, but essentially they're champions for making this change within this organization. And within that, you've then got the people that are representatives and motivators for making the change within the project for the department. And then you've got the implementers who might be, an operational lead or something like that, who has the kind of technical skills to be able to put these things in place. Why I've said Avengers is because the champions really are the important part here, because again, the people part of this systems, process and automation innovation is really, really important to get everybody on board.
I love the hierarchy that you've just, explained, and just what I kept envisioning, like this big army of, let's bring no code. This is how we're gonna do it.
Yeah,
let's get your position, get in your positions, everyone.
absolutely. You know what? It is like when you're running a big project like that, it's a big initiative, and that's why the educational part is so important. And it's important to have everybody on board from the top down as well, and giving people responsibilities so they actually know that they have like a big part in a project like this. I'm obviously giving you this example because this is like the biggest thing that you could be struggling with. But, there are going to be smaller initiatives, an automation improvement project that you're running for like a small part of the business, where you don't need as many people, but you still kind of need those roles, but it's kind of like in a smaller frame.
Mm-hmm.
So just kind of moving on from that. So we've got things like goals, making sure that everybody is clear on the goals and objectives. All of that is being communicated. So, I'm not going to run through all of these, but, things like business goals, flexibility, deadlines, resources, that kind of thing. You want to make sure that you have a proper project plan in place so that everybody is clear on what they're supposed to be doing. And if you're leading this initiative, then you're more than likely going to be the one who is doing it, unless you've got a project manager to work with you alongside that. Before you even start looking at the processes, we need to start understanding what apps there are in the business. Very important here. Why? Because we need to go back to basics and understand whether or not these things are fit for purpose, and whether or not they are cost effective and do the job that they're supposed to do. I'm not saying go and change everything, because there's a lot of cost involved with changing from something that is legacy and does most of what you need to do, and those things need to be taken into consideration. But you have to have a really good idea of what apps you're using in the business. Once you've got your team together, You want to make sure that you are doing brainstorming sessions. So bring everybody in that needs to be in there. And it doesn't have to be a whole team, but select people who can help you to understand how everything is being broken down, especially if you're looking at everything holistically. And you then want to do process workshops to understand what those processes are. And I'm going to show you an example of this so that you get some more context in it. What I find is the most efficient way of looking at a business's processes, systems processes, holistically, is to look at the customer journey. So what happens with a lead? How do they get in contact? How do they get nurtured? Are you taking payment? I mean, this is not, the customer journey could be different for every single business. But the principles are still there. So, this helps you to understand what's happening with the marketing, what's happening with the sales, what's happening from an operational perspective, what that is then happening from the finance perspective. And then you'll be able to cover the kind of the outliers like, human resources and stuff like that. But it then gives you a defined way of being able to break down how a business works into little chunks that you can then flesh out further, again, which I will show you a little bit later. Once you have all of that there and you've started doing the process mapping, you then want to start understanding why people do things, who does it, where it's done, when it's done, what exactly that task is and how. So we can use a process improvement principle called 5W1H to do that. And again, I will show you an example of that so that you can get some context and where this fits into the process. Once you've done all of that, you need to start thinking about how you're then going to plan to implement these changes that you've figured out. So just going back a step, we've got the brainstorming, which is kind of top level of processes, looking at the customer journey. Then you break all of that down into little bits, little tasks. And then you look at each task to understand what actual things are happening as part of those tasks. You're doing your 5W1H to understand much more detail about it. And at that point, you can start looking at how you can make improvements. So this is like, the identify part is the baseline structure. So you have your information, and then we're going to start looking at how we can plan this. So first thing that we're going to do is simplify the process. So we want to have a clear mapped out process. We want to understand the importance of each step. We want to eliminate or modify steps to make them more efficient. And of course, we need to make sure that we, again, have the right people there in the room while you're making these decisions so that you can understand if there are any risks associated with anything. App optimization is a core thing here. So what we find a lot when we're working with businesses is they have all these tools. In a lot of cases, they've got app overload because they've got so many things that they're using. Half of the people don't know what they're being used for. But we also find out that with a lot of the tools that they have, then they're actually paying for subscriptions that give them access to all these features that they're not using. So part of what we would be doing here is to understand, okay, what features and functionality do you have access to as part of what you pay for? Do you need them? If you do need them, how are we going to put those in place to improve the way that you're working? Because if you don't need them, we can maybe reduce on subscription costs because we're kind of taking out things that we don't need, because maybe whoever put the app in place in the first place thought, yeah, I'm going to use all of this stuff. That person's left. Nobody knows why we're on that subscription now. And there's like all this kind of, underutilized technology, or you're paying a lot more for something that you're not going to be using.
That's when you have a bleeding business, right? Because it's just like money coming out of somewhere, set up by somebody who's might have left the company, and there's no documentation or nothing. So, yeah.
And it is so easy to do. Like we constantly, as a business internally, we're always thinking about what we can change, what we can improve, and we do regular app assessments to understand if we should be removing things. Have we got something else? Because it's very easy to kind of sign up to something and you're like, yep, I'm using this. We've done an analysis. It looks great, all of that kind of stuff. And then it starts developing, and then there are other tools that you may have used that you realize features being released in this one, I don't need to use the other one anymore. So important to be able to do this app optimization part. And then also, if you don't have the right apps within the business, then looking at finding and implementing those new apps as well. When you then move on to this next step where you've got all of the right things in place, you've optimized everything. Obviously, this is still the planning stage. We're trying to understand what we should be doing. You then want to be identifying what can be automated, and not just what can be automated, but what should be automated, because sometimes it doesn't make sense to automate something if, say, for example, it's a process that gets done once a year. And one person does it and it takes an hour to do. Maybe that's not the best thing to automate. Maybe focus on something that is, very time, just like this list, very time consuming, things that are prone to error that could be resolved by having automation in place, something that's being copied and pasted or something. Anything that is repetitive, anything that's performed frequently, and really importantly, automation can be very difficult to put in place if you have a lot of logic and you need human intervention for something and the process is not consistent. So it makes it very difficult to put automation in place without issues coming up. So where there's, yes, okay, I'm not saying that you can't automate a process that has a lot of logic in it. Yes, we have the capabilities to do that. But what I'm saying is, think about whether or not it makes sense to automate that process if you know that there might be issues that come out of it. So definitely things to think about. Then we've also got prioritization. So you can use a scoring matrix to understand, how much time something is being spent on. So like if you've mapped out, these are your tasks, and, you've done your five W's of the 5W1H, and you can then start looking at how much time it takes, how error prone is it, how repetitive it is, how valuable it is to the business, and how frequent you're doing. And you can create scores that then help you to prioritize what is the best thing to automate. There are lots of different ways that you can do this, and using lots of different tools. You could build something out in Airtable if you wanted to kind of do your scoring matrix. There are lots of things, but the point is, create something where you can do some prioritization. And I'll show you another way of doing this in a second. Obviously, I'm going to just very quickly run through this because I don't want to spend too much time on technical stuff. But in terms of planning, you obviously need to understand the tools that you're using, and that includes the automation tools that you're using. So you want to know a little bit of technical stuff, at least, if you are the person planning this, and you don't necessarily need to be the implementer. You might have somebody else who's doing the implementation alongside you from a strategic perspective. So having an understanding of APIs, having an understanding of common Zapier terms. Obviously, we use Zapier a lot, but you might be using Make or something else. So understanding the terminology in the tool that you're using for automation, understanding how the integrations work with your tools versus Zapier, and what triggers and actions you can use. And then if there is no integration with the automation tool that you're using, obviously, again, I'm using Zapier as an example here, you need to then understand, well, what more can we do? What are the other options? Is there a private integration that's available, but it's just not publicly accessible? Do I need to get help from app support? Do I need to review API documentation? Build that into your strategy so that you're not just kind of relying on what Zapier says you can do. Also, importantly, what I find a lot when I'm teaching other people is they have a really good understanding of Zapier, but they don't know that there's all this cool built-in stuff within Zapier that allows you to do stuff for free, as in part of your subscription with Zapier. So there are a whole bunch of built-in apps, like apps that run and control conditions and logic, communication apps for extracting data, formatting, managing your account, which is an important one, which I'll get to. And then there's other stuff, a whole lot of stuff. And these are all built-in apps. I think I can't remember now how many it is, 20-something different built-in apps within Zapier. And then next thing, before you're actually going on to executing, make sure that you have a really good visualization of the process that you're planning to implement, and that everybody who is involved in this process really understands what that's going to look like, so that they have input and they can check the logic. Very quickly, last few, and then I just want to show you some use cases, because we're already I'm talking.
Oh yeah, I didn't realize. Just we got 20 minutes to go, but this is so brilliant. And you were so right when you were saying, most people don't realize what comes. We're using Zapier as an example, but what comes with the tool that you've picked, that you've subscribed to. We all kind of like stay at the surface of their capabilities, and there's so much more that you could achieve. And so that's all part of the process. As you were saying, don't just rely on what comes out of the box. Just try and dig a little bit deeper and see how much you can really get from that particular platform that you chose.
Yeah. And I think as well, as I'm sure anybody who's listening to this, you're probably all relatively techie people. I'm a techie person, but I actually think we get excited about like all this cool stuff. Oh yeah, I can build this stuff in Airtable, and that's cool. And like this is like a change. I've taken this like process from paper onto Airtable or SmartSuite or whatever. I get really excited about that. But what's important to remember is don't get distracted. Make sure you kind of go back to the beginning first and you have a really good strategy, because if you get it wrong, you're putting in place something that could end up being really costly and impact significantly on operational performance ultimately.
Yeah, I have a quote that really stuck with me from one of our community members. We, every Tuesday we have our hangouts in our Discord, and he was telling us how automating chaos only gives you chaos faster.
Yeah.
And that is so true. And I was like, oh my God, that, that simple sentence really is so powerful.
Yeah, it is, because, a lot of businesses are already chaotic, and then to kind of try to put things in place. I mean, it's the same as that Bill Gates thing. If you trying to automate something inefficient, it's going to end in disaster, basically. So yeah. Right, just quickly get through these. So execute. So this is where we're going to be putting in place the things that we've planned to do. So important system optimization, we talked about that. Then you're focusing on your integration and automation. Then you're documenting processes, and that could be, in a wiki type document, or, maybe you want to use some kind of AI scribing tool or something like that. I'm sure lots of people have got ideas on what they could use. And then importantly, training, even if it is literally just, a video covering what the change in the process is or something like that, so that everybody knows what that change entails. And then again, really important, why it's good to get everybody involved from the beginning, because this is going to be so much easier for you. You won't get resistance, you won't get questions, because everybody will actually understand what's been going on in the changes in this process. And then last but not least, the review part of the cycle. Really important: test, tweak, measure, review. Why is that important? Because you want to make sure that the changes that you've put in place, number one, are relevant, that they still make sense, and that they're getting the results that you're expecting them to get. And then you also want to make sure that you're taking into consideration changes in operations. Like I said earlier on, things are going to change, business is going to change, people are going to change. We're all human. We do things different to the next person, even if it's a little thing. Even if you have a standard operating procedure, we all have our individual ways of doing little things, and things will probably change. So always important to have that continuous improvement mindset in place. And then one other Japanese phrase, jidoka. I love this one, because this is actually about building automations to monitor the automations. So Zapier, for example, has got Zapier Manager apps where you can build management apps, essentially, where things like, Zap errors happen. You can send a Slack message, create a task in ClickUp or wherever you do your task management. And that's really important, because we want to make sure that we're staying on top of errors. And I guess that's where, operator comes in as well for, the bigger companies who have a lot of this stuff going on. But this is really important because if you don't have a way of managing errors and being able to rectify those as soon as possible, you're going to be in that chaos situation, like you mentioned, Claudia.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is also something that gets underestimated a lot. I found out, like, people don't necessarily use monitoring, or they don't think necessarily that their automations need to be monitored, and then they end up 1 month ahead, like, and they're like, oh, how have we missed like 200 leads? What happened? And a zap had stopped working, or something had broken in between. And so
Yeah.
it's so important. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, totally important. And we do a variety of things for our clients. So we try to empower them to be able to manage the process themselves. But there's some clients that want us to kind of stay on top of what is going on and action things quickly. So yeah, it's so important to have those automations in place. The automations, checking the automations. And then lastly, going back to continuous improvement, Kaizen basically means continuous improvement. And, you can put in this cycle of plan, do, check, act. This is this, repeating cycle where you want to go back and you want to be monitoring things for improvements. So that's that part. I'm just going to stop this, and I want to go to my browser and then show you some. Can you see that? Can you see my screen?
I can see your mirror board.
Okay, yeah. So that's it. So just to give you a little bit of context, I'm going to fly through this so that there's time for questions. This is a template that we use just to kind of demonstrate how you can break down the process.
Yeah. Can you make it a little bit bigger? That's perfect. Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah. If you can do yeah. All right.
That good?
Awesome. Yeah. Perfect.
So basically what this is about is how we break down everything. So this is we're starting with these core functions: marketing, sales, operations, finance, human resources. We're then segmenting all of these so that you can look at individual tasks. So social media, for example, paid ads. We're just brainstorming and dumping all of this information top level. Then we're reorganizing it so that we can then start looking at, okay, for each one of these things, we can start breaking down individual tasks so that we can understand what we can improve. We've also had our app brainstorming that we talked about. You then want to start fleshing out the process for each one of these. So like if we chose employee expenses, for example, you then want to start mapping your process out. And, I think process mapping is a really individual thing, and you should just find whatever works best for you. But the logic really should be, make sure that you have a process, you're using process mapping techniques that are simple and straightforward for other people to understand, not for the person mapping the process. Because what I find is that when you're trying to show this to somebody else, they're like, I don't understand these flowcharts. I'm like, this is like, my brain doesn't work like that. So if you have, get some feedback from people, how they want to be able to see things. And I find that, Miro is great. Just being able to kind of use these post-it notes and then be able to change things. And, you can get as complex as you want, but think about the other people rather than what is good for you.
Would you have a couple templates like to offer that stakeholder, like to say, would you rather have these in Notion, Miro, or would you ask them and then create your process mapping?
I think, I think first of all, you need to decide, if you're the person who's doing the process mapping, I think you need to choose the tool that works for you if you're doing that mapping. But what you do need to get feedback about is how it gets visualized. So I think the tool should be something that's individual to you if you're doing the process mapping, because, you still need to be efficient. But the way you do the mapping, I think you should get feedback on how that looks, whether or not somebody wants to see a full process map or they're just happy with seeing something like this.
Yeah. Or they just tell you like, oh, can you just sum it up in like three key takeaways?
Yeah, exactly. Whatever kind of works better for other people that need to visualize it. So then the next thing was what we talked about, 5W1H, where you can start then taking that process, understanding the different apps that are involved, understand who's involved in the process, and then start breaking down these other bits. So, you know, what data do you collect, for example? When does it happen? What is the reason? You know, why is it important? And there's no H in there, of course, because we're then going to look at the priority scoring, because you use what I showed you earlier on, where you can use that matrix, but you can also do priority scoring, the how part, by doing something like this, giving a score and then putting the impact against it so that you can understand whether or not it should be a top priority process to automate or not. As part of what we were talking about earlier on, really important to make sure that when you're documenting this process, you're kind of looking at each stage. So you've got a first version of it. You're then looking at the logic, where you can take out bits that don't need to be in there. And then you have a documented final process, ultimately, that is going to work better for everybody else. You, as part of that, have understood what triggers and actions you can use and how you're going to build out your automations. But then you're actually defining that workflow for the process owners so that they can understand how this is going to work for them efficiently. What's going to be automated, what is going to be manual, and, you know, what we need to take into consideration in terms of conditional logic. So that is just an overview of, you know, how we kind of teach this whole thing to other people. But what I did want to show you was just some examples very quickly of projects that we've put in place for businesses where we've done this whole thing from start to finish. So we've done the whole process mapping, understanding their systems, identifying what should be there and what shouldn't be there. And I'll give you an example of a business that actually, very interestingly, they had, other than email and OneDrive, they had no technology in place. They literally were doing everything off you know, a notebook. They were storing credit card details in a safe and processing credit card details. I mean, like, insane. Like, you wouldn't believe that businesses like this actually exist. And the biggest challenge for us trying to help them to digitize was actually the fact that the two people that were working in this business weren't very tech savvy. So we actually had to find solutions for them that would really work very well for them once they got used to the new way of working, but also have something else that may not have actually been good for them to use, but would still fulfill the job that it needed to fulfill. So basically, just to kind of give you an oversight, they are a nanny agency, and they basically send out nannies to clients to look after, you know, babies and young children and do various things. And we set up Pipedrive for them because they needed a really simple CRM to use to manage this process, have all the customer information, lead information, being able to communicate, how the email's integrated, and all of that kind of stuff. And to really have a better way of working than what they were using right now. And why Pipedrive? You're probably thinking, okay, well, there are loads of different things out there. Pipedrive has got a really good, simple interface, and people can use it very simply. And you might be thinking, oh, well, why didn't you just build it out in Airtable or something like that? Because actually, we did decide to use Airtable for something, but not the CRM aspect of it. And we could have put the CRM aspect in Airtable, but we needed to give them something simple to use. And why we put in place Airtable is because they needed a way, and I can't actually show you how it's set up because of confidentiality. They've got a lot of confidential information in there, but basically we then needed a way to manage nanny timesheets and automate how invoices were sent out to the clients at the end of the month. And we then had to build everything out in Airtable, have a bunch of automations that run between Pipedrive and Airtable, create timesheets on a monthly basis. So there's a lot of logic that's involved in this. plus being able to get nannies to fill out forms. So we used interfaces within Airtable. They fill out a pre-filled form. It then will automate the generation of an invoice within Xero, their accounting system, that then gets sent out automatically once they've gone in and checked the timesheets. So that obviously there is a little bit of manual intervention, but the whole process is now completely automated. They're not losing leads. They're not losing track of what everybody is. Their invoicing was taking them 2 days to do. Like, that is like the most significant portion. They literally, because they were going in and creating every single invoice, check the timesheet, texting on WhatsApp to say, how many hours did you work? You know, how many days did you work? It was like crazy.
And I was thinking, like from just having a Google Drive, what you were saying at the very beginning, like this is so important for, anyone who's listening here as well, because as an operator or as an automation professional like yourself, I feel like you almost also had to kind of hold your horses there, because you had so many options. You basically had the chance to automate their whole system, right? But you really focused on actually what is it that they will understand, how can I provide a solution to their needs, rather than what I think should be done, right? Because you could have potentially done all of that, the CRM, the automation on Airtable, the interface on Airtable, but would they have understood that?
No way.
No way. And so it's really important to see what your end user at the day or at the end of the automation really understands and what they really need, even though you have a clean sheet like what you had when you first started working with them.
Yeah, I mean, I think and not to say that they didn't need a lot of hand holding. They did. We're changing their whole lives and way of working. But to find the right tools for them, super important. Make sure that we're reducing the amount of time that they're spending, and that we're still making it affordable for them. They're a small business. They still need to be able to afford the apps that they're using ultimately. And even though we've got automations that are running between Pipedrive and Airtable and back again, and stuff going into Xero, the amount of time that they save, even just on the invoicing part, never mind all the rest of the operational stuff, the invoicing part has literally gone down from like 2 or 3 days of working time, with errors, with problems, and now having to be able to actually collect money by direct debit, where they were doing everything on a credit card, storing the details. Everything is automated, and it takes them a few hours to just literally check the timesheets and do some chasing, which actually a lot of the chasing is automated. But yeah. So
that is life-changing. That is life-changing.
Life-changing. Yeah. So that's just one example. I could go into so many other examples, but there are things like moving businesses from using Salesforce, paying loads of money on subscriptions on Salesforce, to bringing their CRM and project management into SmartSuite, for example. And all the automations run within SmartSuite, with the exception of like creating invoices in their accounting system. So yeah, it's so important to just go back to basics. Have you got all the fit for purpose things in place, all your apps? Understand if we can change the process, make it better, and then automate.
Absolutely. And I love that you chose this example, because it really incorporates your whole 60 minutes presentation and all the key points that you were trying to explain to us, and you've done it so brilliantly. I always feel like I want to learn more and more from you, because you have so much experience, but just the way that you approach automation is so thoughtful as well. And again, these are key concepts that anyone should be really learning, right? Build those foundations before you approach a new project, before you sign up a new client, because this will help in the long run, right? So much. and it will help you scale. And what we focus a lot here at NoCodeOps and the events that we provide you has to do a lot with scaling and streamlining your operations. And I feel like this masterclass here from Kelly has just done that for you. So thank you so much, Kelly.
You're welcome. Very welcome. Glad to be here.
I think we do have about 3 minutes if you're happy to take maybe one question.
Yes, I'm going to try and stop sharing.
Oh, I'll put it away for you. There you go. Awesome. And so people in the chat or in the audience, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I know that we only have a limited time, but I've also shared Kelly's LinkedIn profile. So I do encourage to go ahead and connect with her and keep on learning from her. But also, maybe this won't be the last time that you see her here at NoCodeOps. Little sprinkling hints. All right, let me see. All right, let me get a question here. From Andre Baliko, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. How do you keep documentation up to date?
Oh gosh, that is like a whole nother webinar. Yeah, I think you have to, again, have a good place to have change control in place. So, if you have, say, for example, like we use ClickUp internally. So we have a document management system where we can do version control. And again, this is stuff like we're constantly improving on. We don't have the perfect process for what we're doing, so we're constantly improving on that. But yeah, having somewhere, whether it's Airtable or Notion or wherever you want to have it, where you can have clear understanding of changes that need to be made. Maybe you want to use forms for getting people to give feedback on things that they might want to change within the document or things that have actually been changed. Making sure that you do a risk assessment on those changes that you're going to make, and then having version control and people signing off the process. So I think baseline, you kind of need somewhere, ClickUp, Notion, Airtable, or whatever it is, to be able to have links to your documents and control the versions. So yeah, bit of a change control process for documentation.
And we have so many good questions in the forum. We might tackle them. Like, stay tuned. Follow, you know the gist. Follow, subscribe to these events, because you'll get notified when we have new ones coming up. So we can try and maybe have another little session where we answer all these amazing questions you have. One last one from Dominic Festa.
Yeah.
Because it's a very interesting, it's quite long as well. So I'm just going to give it some time. One of the obvious benefits of leveraging no code or low code across an organization is that, in theory, anyone can build solutions for their own workflows or business functions. In practice, though, as you scale and automate an automated system across those functions, do you find that fewer contributors can follow the logic? Particularly in smaller teams, how do you ensure that multiple individuals retain proficiency and control over these systems, preventing a single point of failure?
So I think this goes back to having one person. So like we were talking about that structure, sponsor, project leads, champions, implementers. First of all, I think you need somebody who is absolutely responsible for overseeing any of this stuff that is happening. So you want to think definitely about empowering people to make changes, but you have to have a really good change control process in place for any changes that are being made operationally, so people understand what the impact is of changing an app or changing a process or changing an automation. So you need a change control process. And if you've empowered people to do that, following your change control process, I think it's just a case of upskilling and maybe having a skills matrix that you then have transparency of which people in the organization are responsible for different things, who the champions are, who the implementers are, and who they report to ultimately. So I think it's just all about, again, process and change control, and yeah.
And pick your Avengers wisely.
To pick the Avengers wisely, yes. Absolutely.
Amazing, Kelly. Thank you so much. My last question, and we'll wrap it up. If you were to give a piece of advice to our operations professionals out there, what would it be?
Oh gosh, take some time off sometimes. That's my advice.
Don't burn out.
Don't burn out. Yeah, that's the advice.
Awesome. And also, I mean, if you do feel overwhelmed and if you feel on the edge of a burnout, you're not alone. Join our community. It's free. You'll find a lot of support and knowledge in there. So, yeah, check us out and we'll love to have you there with us.
Yeah, safety and comfort in numbers.
Always, always. All right, Kelly, thank you so much. And
you.
I hope you have a great rest of your week. And I'll see you very soon.
Great. Nice to see you all. Thanks, everybody, for being here and listening and asking questions. It's been great.
Yeah, and learning from you. Bye, everyone. Take care. I'll see you all next week. Same time, same YouTube channel. Bye.